class, here we are. We're starting chapter 1.2. You're going to be on page 1 and you're going to write down your I can statements. There are 3 places for these 3 I cans. Your I cans are: I can add integers, I can solve real world problems involving addition of integers, and I can explain the solution for adding integers. Please freeze the video and make sure you get all of this down on page 1. Alright, now that you have that all on page 1, you're going to turn to page 5, and you can see that on page 5 you already have your topic in, and your topic today is adding integers. So let's get to the essential question. Today's essential question is: how can you tell if the sum of 2 integers is positive, negative, or 0? Before we can actually answer this question, we have to cover some vocabulary. The first vocabulary we are going to be covering is opposites. Opposites are when 2 numbers that are the same distance from 0, but on opposite sides of the 0. So let's say I have a number line, and I'm trying to find opposites. So a really great example here is -3 and 3. They're opposites because here's my -3. The absolute value of -3 is 1, 2, 3. And the absolute value from 3 to 0 is 1, 2, 3. So they're the same distance from 0. That means absolute value. What is the absolute value? Their absolute value should come out to be the same. So I could even say -1,000, 765. Opposite is a positive of that, 1,765. Notice 1 has to be negative and 1 has to be positive. Well, some non-examples would be, say, -3 and -2. They're not on opposite sides of the number line. They don't have the same absolute value. Because if I take the absolute value of -3, I get 3. If I take the absolute value of -2, I get positive 2. Excuse me. Those are not the same. They're not the same distance. So these are non-examples, guys. Now this is really important for our next vocabulary word. Additive inverse. This is where we're going to be adding those opposites together. So the additive inverse, this is all going to go on the same line. Additive inverse is the sum of an integer and its additive inverse or opposite is 0. Pause the video, make sure you have those words written down. So on our example just a second ago, I had -3 and +3 are opposites. Well, let's double check that. So here's my number line. Here's my 0, here's my 3. There's my -3. Well, okay. So now I look at this and I go, okay, here's my -3 and here's my 3. But that's not what we do. What we do is we look at our first number and I put it on my number line. Okay, so we always start with our first number, and in this case our first number is that -3. Okay, now we're adding, so that means we're going to go to the right of our number line, and we're adding a positive 3. So we're going to move to the right. 1, 2, 3. We ended up at 0. Well, that's true every single time you have a number and its additive inverse or opposite. They cancel each other out and they end up at 0. So the other number I had on there was 1,765 plus negative 1,765. I know those are the same numbers, except for this one has that negative symbol on it. So I know without having to do any math that is always going to be 0. But this is always true if the numbers are the same but on opposite sides of 0. So if I had a number that was negative 2 plus 3, that would not give me 0. So I would start at my negative 2, and I would move to the right 3. So let's move to the right 3. 1, 2, 3. That gets me to positive 1. So notice how I did not end up at 0 because these two numbers are not the same. So that's a non-example. All right, well, as math has gotten hard, as you've been going in your math career, you have been adding integers with the same sign. So when you are adding integers with the same sign, it's actually really, really easy. So when you add integers with the same sign, add the absolute value, then use the common sign. So if we look at this example that you need to write down, and I'm going to have you pause right now and make sure you have all of this in. Pause the video and write this down. All right, now that you have this written down, I'm looking here, and I see that this is a positive 2 because mathematicians are lazy. We don't always write the positive sign in front of a number. If it doesn't have a sign, it is always positive. Then we're adding positive 5. Again, there's not a sign written right here, but it is a positive 5. Because if I wrote it out the way it should look, it would look like this. That's a lot to write. We don't want to write all of that. So mathematicians just do what is over there. So now it says, okay, so now I'm going to do the absolute value. The absolute value of 2 is 2. The absolute value of 5 is 5. So 2 plus 5 is that 7. Now both of these numbers are positive, so my answer is going to be positive. Again, you could write it just like this, or you could write it as positive 7. I won't dot down for that, but mathematicians technically would not write this positive number here, positive symbol here, okay? But let's look at this other example. So now write down this other example. Here I see both of my numbers are negative, okay? Now, I'm going to do the absolute value of them. Absolute value of negative 4 is 4. Absolute value of negative 8 is 8. And now I'm going to add those together and I get 12. But because both of my numbers are negative, I have to use the common sign. They both have that negative out front, so my answer has to be negative. So the correct answer is negative 12. All right, we'll practice this in class. Make sure you have all of this written down. Bye, class.